On Thanksgiving Day 2009, 26-year-old medical student John Edward Jones, along with his brother Josh, family, and friends, a total of 11 people, decided to explore Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. That evening, John's group entered the cave. After reaching the big slide area, the group split into two. 7 people chose to return, while John, his brother Josh, and 2 other friends decided to continue toward a narrow passage known as the birth canal. This passage is extremely tight, resembling the process of being born, as it leads to a larger space, giving adventurers the sensation of rebirth after passing through it. At first, John navigated the birth canal without issues, but being unfamiliar with the route, he mistakenly entered a different passage at a fork in the path. Believing that the birth canal was below him, he decided to proceed headfirst, seeking the thrill of squeezing through tight spaces. However, he soon realized something was wrong. The passage was far too narrow. He had no room to turn around, but seeing through his headlamp that the space ahead seemed to widen, he pushed forward. The passage sloped almost vertically downward, and John felt that this matched the cave map's description. Without hesitation, he continued crawling forward, hoping to find an exit. Unfortunately, he had unknowingly entered a dead-end crevice that was only about 25 centimeters wide and 46 centimeters high. Once he reached the crevice, he was completely trapped, unable to move backward, turn around, or free himself. Realizing his predicament, he called out for help. Josh, recognizing the severity of the situation, attempted to pull John out, but John was stuck head down in the narrow crevice. The tight rock walls created too much friction, making it impossible for Josh to pull him out. Additionally, the small surrounding space prevented Josh from using his full strength. Not only did his attempt fail, but it also caused John to slip even deeper into the crevice, pinning his arms behind him and leaving him completely immobilized. At this point, the family understood the gravity of the situation and immediately called the local rescue team, who arrived at the scene shortly after. The rescuers initially tried the same approach as Josh, pulling John out manually, but this proved unsuccessful. They then decided to use a pulley system, securing ropes to John's legs in an attempt to extract him. Once the rescue strategy was set, the team installed multiple pulleys and drilled holes into the rock walls to create anchor points. This method initially showed progress. John was gradually being pulled out and was on the verge of escaping. However, the unstable anchor points and multiple pulleys caused failures at critical moments, forcing John to slip back into the crevice. The repeated slips, combined with his own body weight, created a downward impact force, causing him to sink even deeper into the crevice. Meanwhile, John's physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. Being trapped head down for an extended period caused blood to pool in his head, placing extreme stress on his heart. After 27 hours of rescue efforts, despite trying every possible method, the team was unable to save him. Tragically, John was pronounced dead. Due to the cave's extreme narrowness and the high risks involved, rescuers decided not to retrieve his body, fearing further danger to future rescue teams. With his family's consent, Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed with cement, leaving John's body buried in place. Ogof Ffynnon Ddu is located in the upper caves of the Swansea Valley in Wales, UK. However, beneath it lies a dense network of underground passages, making OFD the 3rd longest and the deepest cave in the UK. With a total length of 59 kilometers and a maximum depth of 274.5 meters, it is one of the most significant cave systems in Britain. On the morning of November 6, 2021, 38-year-old George Linnane, Melissa Bell, and Mark Berkey planned an underground expedition. They intended to enter through the middle entrance, follow the underground river through the Marble Shower series, the Great Oxbow series, and the Gnome Passage, and finally exit through the top entrance. The entire journey was expected to take 6 hours. At 9:15 a.m., the trio arrived at the Coombe DWR entrance. Upon entering, they encountered a steep, circular passage so narrow that only one person could slide down slowly, hence its name. Emerging from this passage was described as feeling like being reborn. 20 minutes later, they reached the Gamma Zone from the birth canal area. Although the space remained tight, the passage flattened, and water began to appear on the ground, making it even more challenging to navigate. They had to lie down and squeeze forward to make progress. After 10 minutes, the trio entered the big shanty area, where the passage widened enough for them to walk upright. They then reached a well-known junction where most cavers choose to go to Lower Smith, as it is next to the main passage and offers a better path. The trio initially followed this route, but later decided to take a detour to explore Upper Smith. After reaching Upper Smith, they took some pictures before preparing to return to the main passage. At that moment, Mark led the way, with Melissa in the middle and George at the rear. Suddenly, the rocks beneath George's feet gave way, and he plummeted downward. As he hit the bottom of the cave, the disaster was not over. The loose rocks above, now unsupported, began to fall. A large rock struck George directly in the face before he had time to react, knocking him unconscious. Hearing the commotion, Melissa quickly turned back, only to discover a hole approximately 1.7 meters in diameter had opened up in the ground. Below, George lay motionless, about 9 meters, the height of a 3-story building, below her. Not only had he suffered the impact of the fall, but he had also been struck multiple times by falling rocks. Melissa called out to George, but there was no response. Mark, upon hearing the situation, hurried back and used a rope to descend and check on George. At this moment, George regained consciousness but could only moan in pain. He was too severely injured to speak. Realizing the severity of the situation, Mark instructed Melissa to stay with George while he climbed out of the cave to call for rescue. 3 hours later, the first rescuers finally arrived. They assessed George's condition and found that his face had been pierced, leaving a large hole. A significant portion of his teeth had fallen out, his calves were deformed, and his body had sustained at least 10 fractures. Additionally, his chest had visibly collapsed, indicating probable internal injuries. It was crucial to transport him to a hospital as soon as possible. Before the doctor arrived, they administered painkillers to George. The rescue command team then devised a plan. A stretcher was necessary to carry George out, but the closest exit, the CWMDWR in the middle section, was too narrow, particularly through the birth canal and the marking area. The bottom entrance was even more structurally complex, making it an impractical route. Thus, the team decided to transport George through the top entrance, which, though 3.4 kilometers away, had a wider passage. By this time, 260 cavers from across the UK had arrived, along with medics experienced in cave rescues. Doctors bandaged George and secured him to a stretcher. It took nearly 15 hours to carry him out of the waterfall valley. The next 2 kilometers required swimming upstream along an underground river. Some passages were high and narrow, while others had strong currents. To prevent George from submerging, they tied air belts around the stretcher. In certain sections, rescuers lay in the water to support it. After 9 hours, the team reached the most challenging section of the route, the vertical passage area. Here, cliffs dropped as far as 18 meters. To ascend, ropes were essential. 2 rescuers, one on each side, secured the stretcher, and in narrow sections they had to switch positions with one above and one below. Falling rocks or a misplaced rope could make the situation extremely dangerous. As a result, traversing this 1-kilometer stretch took 12 hours. Upon entering the horizontal section, the path became easier to navigate, though some areas required crawling due to limited space. The final stretch alone took almost 7 hours. On the evening of November 8, 2021, George was finally brought to the surface. He was immediately transported to the hospital, marking the end of a grueling 57-hour rescue operation. This mission surpassed the 1967 Mossdale Cave rescue, becoming the longest, most complex, and most physically demanding stretcher evacuation in British history.